Hi, everyone. I'm writing this as somewhat of a warning, but also a slight cry for help. I do not know who else to turn to that may take me seriously, and I know this community is often eager to help in situations like this. A few months ago in late July, I attended a music festival with my girlfriend Debbie. This particular festival was in a small Wisconsin town called Twin Lakes. It went on from Thursday until past midnight on Sunday, so by the time we left the last show, trudged through the mud, packed up the last of our belongings from the campsite, and drove past the stampede of fellow festival goers, it was pretty late. Her and I have attended this festival for the past 4 years. It's pretty much common knowledge amongst the community that cell phone service is completely gone after the first day. I think it's a combination of being in a small town and randomly filling a small area with thousands of people that causes the system to dissipate so quickly. Because we were aware of this, we fully expected not to have the use of our phone's GPS system to help us navigate the town. This didn't worry us, though, because, like I said, this was our 4th year, and had pretty much learned the route back home by now. Unfortunately, the usual route we were prepared to take was completely blocked off. We saw flashing red and blue lights in the distance, and later learned one of the festival goers had been struck by a vehicle. After waiting for 20 minutes and not moving an inch, Debbie and I agreed that we should try to find another way back. We pulled a U-turn and began to drive in the opposite direction. After a few moments, we saw a side street and decided we'd try it out. This road, well, it was dark. Really dark. The kind of dark that where you drive slow and blare your high beams, which is what I did. Being into horror films, I took the opportunity to make a comment on our creepy surroundings to Debbie. She kind of laughed, but I noticed the fear in her voice and eyes. Being the loving guy that I am, I decided I would take advantage of her fear and scare her even more. Boyfriend of the year, am I right? I switched from aux in the car to the radio and immediately switched to AM. I scanned one by one until I found one that was just blaring white noise. I left it on and began making comments to Debbie in different horror-inspired voices like, "They're watching us," and "Tonight seems like a nice night to die, don't you think?" The crazy thing was, Debbie didn't find my hilarious jokes very entertaining and kept trying to shut off the radio. Buzzkill. I agreed to cut the act and told her that it can all end if she played along a little bit by choosing a random AM station for us to listen to. With an annoyed sigh, Debbie reached over and spun the dial with very little thought. The station she landed on was AM 630. She hit the spooky jackpot with that one. What we heard could only be described as a little girl singing with a high-pitched, distorted voice. I immediately began laughing at her selection, since it was exactly what I was hoping we'd find, and so much more. I whipped out my phone and recorded a Snapchat video of our reactions. I continued to laugh while Debbie nervously chuckled. I actually found it strange and a bit unnerving myself, but did not want to let it show in front of her. You know, my macho guy routine and all that. I went ahead and switched it back to the aux and continued our drive home. A few minutes after switching back, the music got cut off once again, and my high-pitched ringtone flooded the car with an ear-piercing jingle. The number was strange and told me that it was from Russia, so I ignored it. I had recently purchased a URL from GoDaddy and made the foolish decision to not make it private. So my mobile number was made public for all the spammers to find. I mean, that meant receiving calls randomly generated numbers that slowly became a very common occurrence, which is why this one didn't faze me too much. It did a little, though. Most of the spam numbers I received were domestic, and they were received during weekday afternoons. I had never received one at almost 1 a.m. on a Sunday night, let alone from Russia. Not too long after rejecting that call, I received another. Again, it was an international number, this time from Moscow. I figured it was the same person as before, just using that random number generator. And once again, I ignored the number. A few minutes passed when, you guessed it, another call. This one, though, was in fact domestic. The call was coming from Phoenix, Arizona. Since this was from inside the US, and I finally got angry enough to answer and chew out the solicitor on the other end, I picked up. I wish I didn't. I angrily asked, "Hello?" several times and did not once receive an answer. Usually that would be my cue to hang up, but I was annoyed and felt persistent. Not to mention, Debbie was watching and, macho guy routine. I knew someone was there because I was able to hear some background static and the faint sound of someone breathing. "Hey, asshole, I know you're there. What the hell do you want? What can you possibly be trying to sell me at this hour?" The silence lingered for a few more seconds before it was broken. I began to hear music, but not just any music. It was the same style of music we had heard on that creepy radio station we had just turned off before receiving these calls. I felt my face get flush and sort of just froze up, phone still on my ear. I don't know how long I sat like that before I was finally snapped out of it. I hadn't realized what snapped me out of it until Debbie broke the silence in the car. Ugh, what does he want? I looked into the rearview mirror and saw what Debbie was referring to. There was a pickup truck tailgating behind us with its flashed lights on. There was a pickup truck tailgating behind us that had flashed its lights. The driver did it again, just one quick burst of their high beams in our direction. I have no idea what they could have wanted. I was going 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit, so it wasn't because I was impeding traffic. And it was a 2-lane road with no oncoming traffic, so if they were in a real hurry, they could have easily just gone around us and sped up. At this point, I was still on the phone and had not heard anything other than that music coming from the other end. For whatever reason, I did not hang up, and I was too distracted by the tailgater to try to pry more info from the caller. After about 30 seconds of being dangerously close to our car, the truck finally began to switch lanes in an attempt to pass us. It was so dark, so I couldn't see into the driver's side car. So I couldn't see into the driver's car through the windshield. And when they were beside us, we realized that their windows were tinted very dark, definitely past that legal limit. In that moment, it didn't mean much to me, since I figured they would just speed past us and they'd be out of our hair soon. But that didn't happen. The truck got in front of us and slowly began to apply their brakes. Red flags everywhere. I had read enough stories of criminal encounters to know that this could easily be a trap to rob us. Or worse. I knew I had to be tactical to avoid any problems. Debbie, on the other hand, wasn't thinking so clearly. Feeling tired, anxious to be home, and now annoyed to her breaking point by this driver, she swiftly reached her arm and pressed down firmly on my car horn. It wasn't the first time she pulled this move, and it's something she does that I absolutely hate. I always tell her she's going to get us into serious trouble one day, a serious confrontation that will have to be handled by me, so I'm usually quick to grab her hand and remove it from the horn. But this time, I was frozen. I was still on the phone with that mystery caller at this point, subconsciously transfixed on that chilling audio that was still radiating into my ear. Then from the phone I heard it. My car horn. It was delayed by a nanosecond and sounded far away, but I knew it was the same. I heard my car horn coming from the other end of this call. Whoever was in that truck was the person I was speaking to, the person who called us with that suspicious number, with all of the suspicious numbers, the person who was playing that same radio station we had randomly discovered, and now, that same person who almost got us to come to a complete stop in the middle of a Wisconsin backroad at 1 a.m. Fight or flight, it's a funny thing. It's very impressive how fast your mind can actually process information when it's fueled by fear. In what felt like a blink of an eye, my mind ran with the possibilities of reaching for a baseball bat that I kept in the back seat and coming for this driver with all my might. That fantasy quickly went south as I pictured a group of grown men pulling guns, spilling out of the truck, killing me, and doing God knows what with Debbie. I thank God to this day that the stupid macho guy routine came to an end right then and there. I quickly and haphazardly slammed down on the gas and swerved around the truck, picking up as much speed as I could. I might not have the fastest car in the world, but it is in pretty good condition. It was more than enough to escape that old worn-out pickup truck that was following us. After about 10 minutes of speeding well past the legal limit, blowing through stop signs, and living out all of my Vin Diesel fantasies, we were back in the more sprawling, busy area of our route. There was no sign of that truck. Debbie, who was screaming at me for the last few minutes of this escape, was reduced to quietly crying as she clutched a pillow tight to her chest. My adrenaline had worn off, and now I was feeling shaky. We had been riding in dead silence this whole time, so I reached down to the floor of the car for my phone. I figured that we could both benefit from some cheery music to help lighten the mood, since we were both clearly not eager to discuss what had just happened. I grabbed my phone, and I tapped that home button. The screen illuminated, and I saw that I was still in the middle of that call. I never hung up the phone before speeding away, and apparently neither did the mysterious caller on the other end. We approached the red light, and I slowed to a stop. And that's when I put the phone up to my ear. My breathing was undoubtedly audible at this point. At first, I was met with silence, other than the same muted white noise as before. The silence was broken by the caller. In a deep voice, I heard one sentence that filled my body with nauseating chills. "Almost had you." After that, the call ended. I must have looked shaken because Debbie nervously looked at me and asked me what was wrong. I simply shook my head without a word and continued driving. About 30 minutes later, we arrived home. At that point, we were so exhausted that we just walked inside, decided to leave unpacking the car for the next day, and dropped into the bed without even bothering with showers. The next morning, I grabbed my keys and went to bring the car closer to our apartment entrance in order to speed up the process of emptying all our camping gear. I got to the car and when I hit the unlock button on the keys, I did not hear the sound of the doors unlocking. Instead, I heard the dull thud of the locks remaining the same. In our tired gaze the night prior, we had neglected to lock the doors. I peeked inside the car and saw that everything seemed to still be there, including some cash that was visibly strewn across the passenger seat. I figured that we'd just gotten lucky and proceeded to go inside. Right away, I knew something was wrong. It was the smell. Whether you know it or not, every single person has a scent. You can smell it when walking into certain homes or smelling someone's worn clothing. In that moment, I was picking up a scent that did not belong to me or Debbie. It wasn't bad per se, but it was undeniable and slightly musty, with a hint of menthol. I got out of the car and inspected it once more. Again, nothing really seemed out of place. I took a breath and told myself I was just imagining things once again, and I climbed back into the driver's seat, this time ignoring that unusual smell. I stuck the key in the ignition and fired up the car. I almost jumped out of my skin when the radio began to blare. I could have sworn we had turned it off, but hell, I thought we at least locked the doors too. It wasn't the radio that was scaring me. It was the fact that the radio was on the loudest setting, and it was programmed to AM 630. I could almost hear my heart beating rapidly as I stared wide-eyed at that console. I knew for a fact that we had switched that to the aux setting. I knew it. The radio station, it was no longer playing the haunting sounds like last night, and was now just projecting sounds of some obscure talk radio or news channel. At that point, I didn't have enough energy to deal with this anymore. I turned off the radio and drove the car up to the building entrance. Debbie was waiting there for me. We both looked exhausted, and without speaking very much, her and I worked together to empty this car. I parked it back in our spot, and that was that. There was no more weird calls, other than the usual spam. No strange discoveries with the car and that radio station, etc. I turned to it a few times and found out that it was still just the same boring news channel. Since Debbie and I live in Chicago, I figured it makes sense that it would change. And things went back to normal. That is, until last week. It started when I checked my phone in the middle of my lunch break at work. I had 4 missed calls, all from random numbers. The last one was the same Phoenix number I picked up on the way back from Wisconsin. That number had left a voicemail. In the voicemail, as you may have guessed, it was more of the creepy music that we heard that night. There were no other sounds or voices, just that damn music. Since then, I had noticed a lot of cars with Wisconsin plates. It's probably just all in my head, you know? Cars from neighboring states, it's nothing crazy. But it just seems like they're way more than usual. Parked around our apartment, driving past me on the street, etc. I would probably be able to brush this all off if it wasn't for what happened to me yesterday. I was getting out of a meeting at work and checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls. 2 from random numbers, again, nothing super unusual. And 1 from Debbie. She had left me a voicemail. Upon playing it, I almost threw up my lunch. It was that eerie music. I called her right away and she picked up after the first ring. She answered normally and I began to ask her what the voicemail was all about. At this point, I figured she was playing a prank on me this whole time and just forgot to mask her number before making this particular call. I demanded that she confess it was her. And when she finally started to cry while denying it all, I relented. I apologized for screaming at her. I explained everything that was happening for the past week and ended it all with her missed call and voicemail. It was quiet on her end. When she finally spoke, the adamant fear in her voice began to make sense. She explained to me that she couldn't have made those calls. She was running errands and she had been grocery shopping at our local mega chain supermarket. In a rush to stay on schedule, she had forgotten her phone in the car. I don't know what to do. A small part of me still suspects that she may be playing a very long practical joke on me, but she has never really been the pranking type. And even if she was, how could she have orchestrated the radio station or the pickup truck? It just doesn't add up. All I know is I haven't let my guard down for a while. I'm carrying a knife on me and I'm looking into getting a conceal and carry license, ASAP. I'm gonna insist that Debbie does the same. She's not a big fan of guns, so if she is behind this, maybe that'll be what makes her confess. Has anyone in southern Wisconsin areas, by any chance, had experience with this radio station? If not, please do not access it. I can't be sure it's the station itself has any connection to what's happening, but why risk it? I'm scared. I hope this ends soon. I hope you ghouls enjoyed this Wisconsin creepypasta / no sleep. I guess I couldn't find a good creepypasta, so I found this no sleep and I like it a lot. So I hope you enjoyed it. It was a nice long one. And I do apologize for not posting regularly. I feel like shit about it. But my son doesn't start summer camp until like July, like the middle of the July. I don't know. But I've had him 24/7 when I'm not at work. So it's been really hard to narrate. So I really do apologize, but I really hope once he gets into summer camp, I will actually have the time of day on my days off where I can actually record stuff. That would be nice. But yeah, and thank you ghouls for sticking around. I do apologize for not like replying to messages and comments and all that stuff. It's been a hectic month, pretty much. But hopefully as July comes, it will cool down and I will be able to take a breath and finally put myself back into YouTube again. But as always, ghouls, the last video will be on the top left. The next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen, as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.